Hello, everyone. My name is Ava, and today I want to share a past that I can never forget. Every time I think about it, my heart feels heavy, and I can't stop blaming myself. It's a story I wish I hadn't lived, but life doesn't always make things easy. It all began many years ago when I was just 18, living with my family in London, a beautiful city, but one with its own hidden darkness. Back then, I thought I had everything. My family was wealthy, and both of my parents were successful. My father was a busy businessman, and my mother was a skilled interior designer. Despite their busy lives, they always made time for me and my two older twin brothers, Nathan and Jack. They were 2 years older than me, and if I had to describe them, I would say they were both incredibly charming and handsome. Honestly, I've always felt lucky to have them as brothers. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video until the end and like it because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. As the youngest in the family, I was spoiled by my parents. They never allowed me to want for anything, whether it was material goods or affection. But to be honest, I always felt that no matter how much my parents loved me, it wasn't the same as the love Nathan and Jack gave me. They were more than just brothers. They were my protectors, always watching out for me. The way they loved me seemed more profound than my parents' love because they always expressed it through actions and gestures that came from deep concern. My parents loved me by providing me with a comfortable life, but Nathan and Jack did more. They truly understood me in ways my parents sometimes couldn't. When I was sad, they noticed, even if I didn't say a word. They were always the ones I could confide in without fear of judgment. When I was younger, if I fell or was bullied at school, Nathan and Jack were the first to step in and defend me. Once, I was mocked by classmates because of a dress I wore, and when I came home crying, they didn't just comfort me. They went to the school to confront those kids. They didn't use violence, but instead, their sharp words and cold demeanor made sure those kids never bothered me again. To me, they were like heroes, always ready to help whenever I needed them. I remember the evenings when our whole family would gather, but I always wanted to sit between Nathan and Jack. They'd wrap their arms around me, sometimes even playfully arguing over who would sit next to me. They always joked, calling me their little princess, and swore it was their lifelong duty to protect me. Over time, I began to realize that their love for me was different from anyone else's. They were also the first to help me through my teenage insecurities. When I felt unsure about my appearance, Jack would spend evenings teaching me how to apply light makeup and reassure me that I was beautiful just the way I was. Nathan helped me pick out clothes, always calling me the cutest little sister in the world. They made me feel cherished, and their love was something special. In my eyes, they weren't just my brothers. They were my emotional rock. Whenever my parents were busy with work, Nathan and Jack were the ones who took me to school, helped with my homework, and ensured I never felt lonely. Late at night, if I couldn't sleep, I would knock on their door and they'd always greet me with a warm smile. Sometimes, they would tell me funny stories or simply sit by me until I drifted off to sleep. It was those small things that made me believe their love for me was far greater than anything I ever received from my parents. But that love, the one I believed to be pure and innocent, would eventually lead to a haunting experience that changed everything. I'm not sure if anyone will truly understand, but when I was 18, something happened that completely altered my life. I will share the rest when I gather the strength to face that part of my memory. I remember it clearly because we were so close. As the youngest in the family, I often did silly things without fear of scolding. Sometimes I would suddenly jump in and hug them or casually sit on their laps if they were sitting somewhere. Nathan and Jack weren't just my brothers. They were my closest friends, people I never felt shy around, even when showing affection. One afternoon, on a warm summer day, I walked out of my bedroom. The sunlight streamed through the large living room window, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Nathan and Jack were sitting on the sofa, focused on the TV. I didn't know what they were watching, but they looked very absorbed in it. Without thinking, I walked closer, rubbing my eyes. They didn't notice me approaching, so I mischievously jumped onto the sofa and sat on both their laps. At that moment, Nathan was startled, and Jack burst out laughing. "Little sister, what are you doing?" he asked. I chuckled, said nothing, and settled comfortably on their laps, resting my head on Nathan's shoulder. "What are you two watching so intently?" I asked, but didn't get an answer right away. When I glanced at the screen, I realized it was a romantic movie. Just at that moment, the movie was reaching its emotional climax. The two characters on screen were hugging and sharing a passionate kiss. Seeing me staring at the screen, both Nathan and Jack became awkward. Jack smiled shyly and quickly covered my eyes with his hand. "Don't look, Ava. This isn't a kid's movie." I laughed, trying to wriggle out of his grasp. "I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 18. I teased, though secretly, I found the scene quite interesting. I continued trying to peek through Jack's fingers, laughing and teasing them at the same time. At that moment, I unconsciously moved my hand to balance myself on Jack's lap. Whether intentional or not, my hand brushed something inside his pocket. The hard, warm feeling startled me, and my heart raced. I quickly pulled my hand back. I didn't dare look at either Nathan or Jack. "I'm sorry," I stammered, then quickly stood up and ran to my room. I slammed the door behind me, my heart pounding. I sat on my bed, wondering what had just happened. The image of the remote control in Jack's pocket kept replaying in my mind, making my face flush. Was I overthinking it? Or was it an accident? I didn't know, but the shame and embarrassment lingered, and I couldn't bring myself to leave my room. The thought of what Nathan and Jack might think of me kept me in my room, unable to shake off the image that haunted me. It wasn't just the physical touch, but the uncomfortable realization that I had crossed a line I never even knew existed between us. The closeness we shared seemed to have a fragile boundary, one I had never thought about before. That evening, after hiding in my room for a while, I decided to go down to the living room. I was getting hungry, and I knew my family was probably waiting for me to join them for dinner. But the events of the afternoon still lingered in my mind, and I felt a bit embarrassed. I kept wondering if Nathan and Jack were thinking about what had happened. But then, I reassured myself that maybe it wasn't as serious as I thought, and perhaps they had already forgotten about it. I opened the door quietly and tiptoed down the hallway, hoping not to meet their eyes. As I approached the living room, I stopped to listen for any sounds. The room seemed empty, so I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking they were probably in the kitchen or somewhere else, not paying attention to me anymore. I tiptoed into the living room, looking around, afraid I'd catch their gaze. But to my surprise, no one was there. How strange, I thought, and stopped in front of the sofa where I had sat with them earlier that afternoon. I was still trying to figure out what channel was on the TV when suddenly, from behind, two faces leaned down, looking in the same direction as me. "What are you doing, Ava?" Jack's voice rang out right next to my ear, making me jump. Nathan laughed loudly from the other side, adding, "You look like a thief." I let out a small scream from the shock, turning around to see them standing right behind me. Their sudden appearance nearly made my heart stop, and we all jumped at the same time. Jack and Nathan looked at me, then burst out laughing while I could only hold my chest, both scared and amused. "Oh my God, you two scared me to death," I said, pretending to be angry, but unable to suppress my laughter, feeling like I'd just been unexpectedly teased. "What about you? You look like you're up to something shady." Nathan raised his eyebrows, smiling mischievously. Jack patted my head teasingly. "You're not planning on eating something, are you?" I laughed along with them. At that moment, the awkward tension from the afternoon seemed to fade away. I reassured myself that what I had touched earlier must not have been what I thought, because otherwise, the two of them wouldn't be laughing like this. With that thought, I felt a bit of relief and tried to act as if nothing had happened. I was just, well, checking to see if anyone was here. I smiled brightly, trying to change the subject. "What are you two doing behind me? Trying to scare me?" Jack shrugged, pretending to be serious. "Yeah, I just wanted to scare you a little, but I didn't expect you to get so startled." Nathan added, his voice playful. "Who would have thought you'd jump up like that? Your face was priceless." We all burst out laughing, and the atmosphere became lighter and more cheerful. At this moment, Nathan placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Okay, let's go eat. The whole family is waiting for you." I nodded, smiled, and followed them into the kitchen. The family was already gathered around the dining table. My parents smiled gently when they saw me come in, and I sat down, feeling the warmth of the kitchen and the peaceful, cozy environment. During dinner, the conversation was full of laughter. My parents talked about work, while Nathan and Jack occasionally teased me with light jokes. I joined in, and the feeling of embarrassment from earlier seemed to have completely disappeared. After finishing dinner, I helped my mother with the dishes before heading to my room to prepare for bed. As I lay in bed, I reflected on the events of the afternoon and the teasing just now. Although I still felt a bit embarrassed, I no longer felt anxious. I smiled to myself, reassuring myself that it would be okay. Nathan and Jack were still the best brothers I'd ever had. With that, I fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, however, things weren't quite over. My room and Nathan and Jack's rooms were only separated by a thin wall, so even the smallest sounds, like movies or music, could be heard. I was known for sleeping late, but that morning I woke up early at 7 a.m. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, or maybe the sunlight through the curtains was blinding me. But no. After a few minutes of waking up, I realized there was a strange sound coming from the next room. My room was positioned between Nathan and Jack's rooms. Our house had thin walls, so even the slightest noise traveled easily. I was used to hearing them play games or talk, but this time the sound was different. At first, I assumed they were watching an action movie, but the longer I listened, the more certain I became that something was wrong. The sound wasn't like typical movie noises. There was a strange rhythm to it, sometimes long, sometimes short. My heart started to race, and a thought popped into my mind, making my face go red. I didn't want to believe it, but the sound grew clearer. It wasn't music, and it wasn't just regular talking either. Even though the walls blocked the sound, I could still hear rapid, sensual noises mixed with heavy breathing. I tried to tell myself to ignore it, but the more I listened, the more certain I became that Nathan and Jack were watching something special. A rush of shame washed over me. Why was I awake? Why did I have to hear this? My heart was racing, and I felt like I was burning. I put my hands over my face, trying to stop the thoughts that kept invading my mind. This is private, I told myself. Everyone has seen things like that, even I have. But hearing it coming from their room made me uncomfortable. We had always been close, and I never imagined facing this situation. I didn't want to hear it, but the sound seemed to cling to me, growing clearer and clearer. I sat up, got out of bed, and opened my door quietly. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't stay still any longer. I walked softly down the hallway, trying to avoid making any noise, but as I reached Nathan and Jack's door, the sound became so clear that it felt as if the walls had disappeared. I stood still, unsure of what to do. My heart was pounding, and I felt embarrassed, confused, and uncertain. I had always known that these things happen, but hearing it from Nathan and Jack's room was completely different. I bit my lip, unsure if I should go back to my room or stay where I was. Curiosity got the best of me, and I leaned against the door, trying to calm myself. The sound only grew louder, pulling me in. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I stepped back in surprise. Jack stood in front of me, eyes wide with shock, looking like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't have. We stood there facing each other for what felt like an eternity. The silence was unbearable. Jack cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "Ava, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flustered, avoiding eye contact. His face was red, and I could tell he was just as embarrassed as I was. I couldn't look at him either. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could hardly get the words out. I was just passing by," I stammered. It didn't sound convincing, but it was the only thing I could think of at the moment. Just then, the sounds inside the room suddenly stopped. Nathan walked out from behind Jack, his face as red as Jack's. They both exchanged glances, trying to find the right explanation, but no one said anything. The awkward silence was overwhelming, and I forced an uncomfortable smile, trying to hide my embarrassment. "I was just passing by," I repeated. "Nothing. I'm leaving." I turned and quickly walked away, eager to escape the situation. When I got back to my room, I quickly closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a deep breath. My heart was still racing, and a strange, embarrassing feeling washed over me. I couldn't stop replaying the awkward scene in my head. The image of Jack opening the door and Nathan's expression when he stepped out lingered in my mind. The atmosphere between the three of us felt thick with tension, and I couldn't shake off the feeling. I kept wondering what they were thinking about me at that moment. Maybe they felt as awkward as I did, or perhaps even more so. What bothered me most was that I had overheard something I shouldn't have. It might have been an unfortunate accident, but I feared it would change how I saw Nathan and Jack, my two closest companions, my brothers, my protectors. I put my hands over my face, trying to block out the negative thoughts, but the more I tried to ignore them, the louder they became. I told myself that this was just an unexpected moment, something no one wanted to happen, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. Just then, I heard a knock on my door. My heart sank. I knew it couldn't be my parents. They didn't usually knock when they needed me. It had to be Nathan or Jack. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, and opened the door. To my surprise, Jack was standing there, still looking flustered. His eyes were averted, and he seemed to be trying to regain his composure. "Ava," he started awkwardly, scratching his head. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier. It's not what you think. Nathan and I were just watching a movie, and maybe the timing wasn't right." I stood still for a moment, unsure how to respond. Jack's face was red, and I could feel the uncertainty in his voice. Then Nathan stepped up behind him, his face showing the same shyness and embarrassment. Both of them seemed unsure of what to say, and the tension between us was almost suffocating. Finally, I decided to break the silence. I smiled, feeling a little embarrassed, but trying to sound casual. "Come on, I didn't mean to make things awkward," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Don't look so tense. I was just passing by." Jack and Nathan exchanged a glance, silently communicating with their eyes. After a moment, Jack sighed and gave a faint smile. "Are you sure, Ava? You don't feel uncomfortable?" he asked, his voice full of uncertainty. I quickly reassured them. "No, I'm fine. Actually, I think I love you both even more," I added, trying to make them laugh. They both looked at me with surprise, and for a brief moment there was a silent understanding between us. Then I had an idea. "Let's go to my room and talk for a bit, okay? Let's consider this making up for the awkwardness," I suggested, smiling, hoping to break the tension. They were surprised by my suggestion, but after a brief pause, they nodded. It seemed like the only way to move past the discomfort. When the three of us sat on my bed, I decided to make a joke to lighten the mood. I looked at Nathan and teased, "So, the movie was so good that you both lost track of time?" Nathan laughed awkwardly, covering his face with his hands. "Come on, Ava. Stop teasing. It's just, we didn't think you'd hear it," he said. I raised an eyebrow, playful. "I thought you guys turned it up so I could hear it." We all burst out laughing, and the tension seemed to vanish. After chatting for a while, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, without thinking too much, "How about we try doing it like in that movie?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I wasn't sure how they would respond, but curiosity had gotten the best of me. Nathan and Jack turned to look at me, wide-eyed, both surprised by what I had just said. "Are you serious?" Nathan asked, his voice full of confusion. I nodded, trying to keep a straight face. "I'm just curious. It wouldn't hurt to try, right?" My voice trailed off, and I couldn't meet their eyes. "No way," Jack replied quickly, his tone firm. Both of them looked away from me, clearly uncomfortable. But I didn't give up. Gently, I squeezed their hands and reassured them, "Just try it once. I really want to know what it feels like." They were silent for a long time, their eyes filled with conflict. Finally, Nathan sighed, looking helpless. "Okay, but just this once, and we have to keep it a secret. No one can know." The room became still. We all just sat there, breathing quietly, unsure of what would come next. The moment felt charged with an unexpected energy, as if the world outside had disappeared, and it was just the three of us. When it was over, the sun had risen high, filling the room with light. We didn't speak. We just lay there, side by side, breathing evenly. The awkwardness that I had feared had completely vanished, and instead, I felt a deeper connection between us, as if we had shared something intense, a bond forged through this experience. Later, we went into the kitchen to prepare lunch, and everything felt oddly natural, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside, I knew that something had shifted between us. A boundary had been crossed. And even though no one else knew, I couldn't hide the fact that things would never be the same again. Nathan looked at me with a soft smile. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, returning his smile. "I'm fine, and I think I love you both even more," I replied. The words made me blush, but when they held my hand, their eyes filled with affection, I knew they understood. "We love you too," they said, and we continued eating, the new bond between us subtly shifting our relationship. Looking back, I realized how impulsive and curious we had been. We crossed a line, unknowingly breaking boundaries that were meant to protect us. Though I don't regret it, I know now that some curiosity should be held back. Boundaries exist to protect us from mistakes that could have lasting consequences. In the end, love and relationships are built on respect, understanding, and responsibility, not on impulse or curiosity.